You are listening to the Rejoice Podcast, leading all generations of our neighbors and nations to follow Jesus.
Welcome to the Rejoice Podcast, episode number 5. We are so thankful you are joining us today. And this actually marks the end of a series, episodes 2 through 5, of an emphasis on missions. And I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to all of those episodes, but we hope that you have and understand what God is doing both locally and globally to make an impact in people's lives. So today we're joined by Corina. Corina is a local frontline missions worker who uses various inroads to meet internationals who maybe have never heard the gospel. So Corina, thanks for joining us. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about you, about your family, and kind of your journey with Christ.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to be able to share. I grew up in a Christian home, came to faith at an early age, and as a young teenager, my parents hosted a couple of international students, exchange students in our home. And that was the first time that I began to be aware of that, you know, you hear about it at church, about missions, but that was the first time I came face to face with people who had never even heard of Jesus. And I had one girl from Japan, another girl from Taiwan, Buddhist girls, and the Lord just really through that broke my heart for missions, and as a young girl. And so at an early age, I decided I felt that God was calling me to do mission work. And so I went to school, went to a Christian school, in fact, and studied English and hoping to be able to teach it in missions. And while there, met someone, a young man who also said he wanted to do missions, and we got married. However, shortly after that, I realized that he was not who I had thought he was going into it, and it became a very abusive situation. And in the end, I had to basically flee for my life. And in that moment, I felt like everything, all my dreams and everything that I thought that God wanted to do with my life just fell apart. And I went through this period of just almost like despair, feeling I was beyond use. But then the Lord really began to speak to my heart, and He provided a job for me at a local community college where I started teaching English as a second language. And I remember my first day in class there, I had the class of about 15, 20 students, and every single one were from an unreached people group. And just the Lord was showing me that this is, I have brought the nations here. And not only that, that God, as long as our heart belongs to Him, and that we pursue Him, He can take anything. And since then, He's used that. He's used even my story to open up the door to share about the gospel with just many, many different people groups, and have seen unreached peoples come to Christ through that. And then eventually started a group here locally that, with other believers that have joined together to reach the nations that God has brought us.
Well, we appreciate you being open about your story. And I think the first thing that jumped out to me was the fact that God had placed in your heart at a very early age the desire to hear the gospel and to respond to it, and this immediate desire to want to tell the world of the good news of Christ. And it's an important reminder, isn't it? Because so many times I can get caught up in doing the parenting thing and forget that every age is such a key age of hearing about every tribe, every tongue, every nation, about God's heart for my child and for every child to hear the good news of Christ. And it's encouraging that God was continuing to do His work at an early age and putting dreams and hopes in your heart.
Right.
And then by His grace, He didn't let those dreams die,
Yeah.
even as you've gone through difficult times.
Yeah.
You said that you felt like your dreams had fallen apart as your family went through, major difficulty,
Yes.
and that maybe you were beyond use and you had this despair. Can you speak to just the feeling of despair and what led you to be able to, walk through despair? I know there are probably people listening who feel that same despair even now,
Yeah.
and they wonder, like, should I give up or am I beyond?
Right.
Somehow that God couldn't, His grace wouldn't be sufficient enough to use
Right.
me again, and
Right.
or to help me impact other people.
Yeah. When I went through the abuse and then the subsequent divorce, I had unconsciously, I had not realized this. Growing up, I'd kind of adopted this idea that my relationship with God was somewhat performance-based, that He accepted me and He valued me based on how much I did for Him, and how in order my life was. And when that was stripped away, I came face to face that I really had, from the beginning, I thought I could offer something to God, but I realized that I really had nothing. And that is when I realized that all I've ever had was Jesus. And I remember in the one night that I was just heartbroken. I opened my Bible, and the passage just opened up to Isaiah 54. And in that passage, the Lord says, "I, your maker, am your husband." And in that moment, my relationship shifted from being something that I was always trying to do to try to gain God's approval, to realizing how much He already loved me and that He was going to carry me through. And it really shifted, that no longer was I trying to just please Him, to gain His affection. I wanted to please Him because I realized how much He loved me. And it completely changed the whole way I looked at life. And it became a love relationship instead of performance-based. And so bringing me out of that so then as I learned to just love Jesus day by day, He opened up the doors then to be able to share about Him with others.
Isn't it interesting as well that the very thing that He was helping you realize, maybe in a fresh and new way, about His, perfect, unconditional, unfailing, as the author Sally Lloyd-Jones writes, His unstopping, unrelenting, never giving up kind of love.
Yeah.
In the Jesus Storybook Bible. She writes about that so well, that's probably the same message that is so needed to so many people groups
Yes.
that maybe are stuck in false religions or idol worship or a constant poor theology of thinking they have to perform in order to please God or the gods.
Yeah.
And yet God would, in His graciousness,
Yeah.
use that very same message to impact you, who grew up in a gospel home,
Right.
who yet needed to continue to be reminded, as all of us do.
Yes.
And at the same time, to people who have probably never heard or rather experienced the good news of Christ.
Yes.
So you find yourself as a young adult reaching out to unreached people groups. God, in His graciousness, gives you this opportunity that you couldn't even, create on your own.
Right.
Neither would I. None of us could.
Yeah.
And that's how God works in so many ways. And so you're teaching this English as a second language, and then He opens your eyes to the, reaching the world there in your own backyard.
Yes.
And so talk about that. What was that like, and what did you start to do? What did God begin to teach you with His wisdom about how to even begin to reach out with the love of Christ to those who need it?
Well, I think the first thing that I began to realize as I started interacting with my students, one, I think there's always been a fear of the unknown and working with people that are so different. And as I began to work with them, I realized that essentially they are people. and they have the same needs and the same desires and same hopes that we do, and yet they're trapped. And in darkness and deceit. A lot of people, I always thought, well, they're here in America, so they're going to have access to the gospel, but realized that there's so many cultural and language barriers that even though they're here, they still are not hearing the good news. And so talking with them, I began to find out some sad statistics that more than 90% of internationals that are in the U.S. have never been invited into an American home. Close to the same number have never really had the gospel presented to them in a way that they know. They also, similar to my story, some groups are up to 85% or more have abuse and domestic violence in the home. And so as we begin to pray, Lord, what do we do? The first thing that he laid onto our hearts was first to start inviting them into our homes to live life with us. And that simple invitation, we started having English clubs and dinners and different things, but always in an American home. And we started inviting them. And it was so shocking to them that they were being invited that they just started coming out of the woodwork. And as they sit in our, at our table and in our living rooms, and we just started talking with them, helping them learn their English, they just started pouring out their hearts. And just naturally the friendships began. And through that, as they were in our homes and seeing the difference that our lives had, that there wasn't the fear and there wasn't the shame, they begin to ask questions, and which then lead to being able to share Jesus with them.
So the act of love in hospitality, the
Yes.
act of opening up our homes is really an act of grace, is what you're saying. And,
Yes.
and it seems to me that sometimes I think of opening up my home to someone as one of the, final steps of friendship.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think you have to get to know people, and I'll meet you here, or I'll eat with you there, or maybe even, hey, we'll go see this. And then, like, inviting someone to your house seems to be a natural, like, this is the confirmation of a friendship. And yet, in many cultures, opening up your home is the first step
Right.
to friendship.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
talk to me a little bit about that, and what does that mean for your life? And it's obviously it would cause some interruptions. It caused
Yes.
some lack of, well, I've got it perfectly planned out, and this is how it's going to go. I mean, you really
Right.
have to open your life
Yeah.
to new relationships. So how do you do that?
Yeah. Yes, I always say I plan to be flexible because working with other cultures, they are not schedule-oriented and task-oriented like us. They are, whoever is in front of you is your schedule. And in many cultures, hospitality is at the top of the virtues, and they will, if you come into their community, the first time they just meet you, you're a stranger, and they'll invite you into their home for tea. And that is in their mind how you get to know each other. And also, it sets up this really cool reciprocal relationship. Once you invite somebody into your home, they're expected to invite you back. And once you've been in both homes, in a lot of cultures, they now consider you like family. And when that happens, it just opens up the door to be able to share. However, having people over is not like even our American idea. We usually have, the dinner planned, and we have it just, maybe a couple hours set aside. And often for these other cultures, it's an all-day affair. I've been invited for lunch before, and I arrived there at 11, thinking I'll be there 11 to 1, and wasn't able to leave till about 7 p.m. And so it's definitely... It does take sacrifice of our time and schedules, and yet when we're willing to invest in these relationships and open up our hearts and our homes, almost every conversation that I've had about the Lord with my friends have been in either my home or their home, as we're sitting at the table, as we're just talking. And so it does take some flexibility, but it's definitely worth it in the end.
Yeah, I think that it seems like when I think of that, I think about the idea of the refrigerator rights. You know, you have growing up. I can remember there were kids in my neighborhood that I would just seem like they had refrigerator rights and I had refrigerator rights, and it really meant that we were truly friends.
Right.
And yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about. You know, really, that the gift of hospitality really spans over all cultures. It speaks a language of love that really can get to the heart of people.
Right.
And it sounds like that. Obviously, God's given you a great gift for that and a desire. And it really takes practice, doesn't it?
It
It's
does.
getting
Yeah.
through the fear of what will they think about my home, or what will my neighbor think, or the person in the apartment complex right next to me, or someone who lives down the street. And yet we see Jesus, time and time again, opening up the hospitality. Even Zacchaeus, he goes to Zacchaeus, and he's going to initiate this amazing relationship. And he says, "I'm coming to your house." He invites himself over to Zacchaeus' house in order to show the sign of friendship.
Right.
And so that's an important act, and something I need to be reminded of frequently. And yet you've seen time and time again examples of conversations that have happened about eternity.
Well, if you want to take it even a step further than just having dinner, a lot of internationals, in fact, every semester, we have requests for individuals that need homes. They come here, they spend all of their money on tuition. Often they're not able to afford housing or for one reason or another. About a year and a half ago, I found out about a young woman who her story was very similar to mine and was going through a very violent situation, and her life was in danger, and her baby. And she was one of our international students we were working with. And in that moment, I felt God tell me, "You have a guest room. Invite her home." And so I did, thinking I was going to put her up for a few weeks till we can help her get on her feet on the ground. A year and a half later, she's still with me, but she's become a beautiful part of my home and my family. When she moved in, she was a Buddhist. She had been involved in sorcery. She had tried to commit suicide 3 times. And yet just living in my home and being able to talk day in and day out about the Lord, just a few weeks later, she committed her life to Christ. And ever since then, day by day, she has been growing in her walk with the Lord, and now has become quite the evangelist for her people, and feels called to go back eventually to her own people and reach them. It was not easy. There were days I wanted to have my home back, but God just kept reminding me that this is not your home, it's my home, and He wanted to use it for transformation. And so it's powerful. It's powerful, and God can use it.
So really what you have you have the discipline of on a regular basis is thinking about every tribe, every tongue, every nation in your backyard, to your neighbor, in the classroom, looking for ways, because what we're finding, I believe, and you know so much about this, way more than I do, is what we're finding is one of the key strategies in reaching the nations is to reach first-generation immigrant or second-generation immigrant who has very open access to maybe their country of origin or their family's country of origin, and they're able to have freer access and freer ability, sometimes greater influence and impact because they don't have maybe the barriers or the leadership misunderstandings that we may have, or maybe another person may have that's not in that the family or from that ethnic group.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing time and time again God use this in a great way, in a rapid way.
Yeah. The neat thing is many people from these other cultures are actually even more technologically connected than we are, and they are constantly, all the time, talking and Skyping and, chatting with people back in their home country among their own people. And what is amazing is God has brought, often in my classes, the majority of the students will be from unreached people groups. We've even had people where they're from a group that there are no known believers, and nobody working among them in their country. But they're here and they're gaining access, and we're able to share with them. And they have we've had some that as soon as they hear about a Bible story or the Lord, they will post it and they will send it, like, look what I've learned, and they send it immediately back to their group. And so through that, we really are able to reach into the country, into other nations from here, with the gospel.
So what would you say to a person, maybe there's someone who lives in a massive city, and they look everywhere around them, and they see and hear cultures that they haven't studied or languages they do not know. What would you say to them? Like, how does that person even begin to make an impact, to take a step? And so there's that person, and then there's another person that maybe they live in a rural community. They feel like that all they've ever known or met are people who maybe look like them, act like them, talk like them, eat like them, and they want to care about the tribes and the nations and every tongue, but they don't even know if they've ever met anyone that's different than them. So two groups of people,
Right.
How would you encourage both of them?
Okay. Well, starting with the big city people, almost every international that I've met outside my class are people that I just run into at, let's say that we're at the grocery store. I could tell they're from somewhere else. I just go and see, this is so weird a lot in American culture, and yet I go up to them, I say, hi, I noticed you are speaking another language, or if it's a woman, let's say from India, and her beautiful dress, I love it, you have beautiful clothing, where are you from? And just immediately just ask them their name, where they're from, and welcome them. And almost every time that opens up, and you'd be surprised how many have never been approached by an American. And so when somebody wants to be their friend, they're just, and so it's as easy as going up and saying, hi, where are you from? And saying, I'd love to learn more about your country. Can we get, can we do coffee? You want to come,
You mean so it's as easy as being friendly?
It is amazing, and it's often easier to talk to them, I find, than a random American that I meet there, because they're just hungry for that friendship. And so it's really, if you see somebody, just go say hi. And most likely, in most cases, I end up, by the end of the conversation, I have their contact info, and we're getting together in a couple days. And so. And the Lord just works through that.
So what about that person who, like, they long to meet someone from a total different part of the world? Right. They long to meet someone who maybe, knows multiple languages and has traveled the world and repeatedly, and yet maybe they're just not in a place that's available.
Well, first of all, you would be surprised how that there are internationals sometimes in these smaller communities. You just have to look for them. I do know of a smaller community that there was one little Chinese family that ran the single Chinese restaurant in the whole, county. And yet nobody knew what to do with them. But finally, when somebody, befriended them, the son became a believer just through the friendship. So sometimes they are there. You just have to think, okay, do we have any ethnic restaurants? Do we have any factories? You might find them there. But if you really have no one, technology is an amazing thing. And there are individuals all over the world that want to learn English. And there are, through programs like Skype or different programs, where you can set up, kind of like we used to have in the olden days, we had pen pals. Now it's like Skyping pals or video pals, and they want to practice their English, and you just, you arrange a time, and you sit there and you can talk with people from all different parts of the world, and there's a lot of different ways, even through technology, to do that.
So what would you say as far as resources that maybe are available, books, websites, maybe people you need to follow on social media that like kind of point people in the direction where they can learn and grow and these kind of things?
Good question. I would if you really want to become involved with international students, one thing that I would start with is if you have a perspectives course in your in your area. They give a lot of the tools that you learn through that course, which talks about missions, is directly relatable to what you're going to be doing. Some other great resources online. There's the Association of Christians Ministering to Internationals. It's acmi.org. You get on there, and they can connect you with different ministries in your area that might be working with internationals. They also have a lot of resources, including a really great conference that they put on every year that you can go to and get a lot of resources and make a lot of connections. I would probably go there as my go-to place to see what's going on in your area. Another easy way to find out if anything is going on is even local universities and colleges will have a listing of all the organizations on campus, and you'll be able to, so if you have a university close to you or a college, you can request that and find out if you have anything in your area for internationals. There's another group called Friends of Internationals that has stuff online that you can get and look up. As far as looking up specific people groups, there's the Joshua Project. You can find out a lot of information about different unreached people groups. And when you meet somebody for the first time from another people group, you want to learn about their people, ask them what to look at, and they will usually give you a whole bunch of websites and different resources to look at to find out about their people as well. So they're always a great resource.
I think it's so amazing to hear about how God is bringing the nations to us. I think the number that I saw recently was 900,000 international college students a year come to America.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Yes.
And so God is raising up missionaries that don't have to travel any further maybe than your local supermarket to find people that need to hear Jesus for the first time.
Yes.
We're remarkably thankful for you for you hanging out with us today.
Yeah, well,
and
thank you.
we will definitely be praying for all that you do, remembering you and your family and how you guys have opened up your home and set an example for Christ's love to those who have rarely heard or experienced the good news of Jesus Christ. And so we're thankful for that, and we're thankful for your time.
Well, thank you. It was a blessing to be here.
Wow, what an encouraging word from Corina. We're so thankful for her, thankful for her life, thankful for how she's influencing and impacting the world globally in a local setting. I can't help but walk away feeling encouraged, am called and directed to love our neighbors that are just right here around us, and never thinking maybe sometimes that it may have a massive global impact when people who are in our country for maybe a short period of time, who maybe have never experienced the gospel, but yet Christians walking in love, interacting with people, planting seeds of the gospel, and people carrying that back to their own countries. That's just remarkable. So thankful for Corina, thankful for her ministry. So thankful for you. Again, if you have been impacted by the Rejoice podcast, we'd love to know about it. We want to hear stories about how maybe you're being challenged by it. We would love to connect with you. You can connect with us in a variety of manners. You can check us out on iTunes. You can search Rejoice Podcast. Maybe that's how you're listening to us today. And if you are, why don't you just scroll back to the Rejoice Podcast page, go to the rate and review portion of our page, and let us know how we're doing. We'd love to hear from you. Maybe you're listening to us from our website, rejoicechurch.com. And then under the Watch and Listen tab, there should be a Rejoice Podcast. And you can go there and you can hear all the episodes 1 through now today's number 5. And if you're on Facebook or Twitter, it's facebook.com/Rejoice Podcast, or on Twitter, and our handle is @Rejoice Podcast. And we'd love to partner with you, be an encouragement to you to what you're doing. We look forward to seeing what God is going to do through you and how He is going to lead all generations of our neighbors and nations to follow Jesus. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Rejoice Podcast.